and welcome to this week's episode of Ask Steph. I'm Stephanie Lillian, and every week I answer your most pressing yoga and meditation questions. This week's question is a little bit different from yoga and meditation, but it all encompasses into one. The question for this week is if I have any tips on how to fall asleep easier at night. I have lots of tips, but today I'm hopefully going to boil it down just to a couple for you. So maybe you can try out some new techniques so you can fall asleep easier in the evening. So to start, I'd like you to take some time to reflect on your average day. Do you have a set routine? What kind of time do you wake up in the morning? When do you generally go to bed? Is it all over the place? Do you have a set time that you do things at, etc.? So one of the first things to consider if you're having difficulties falling asleep at night is simply your routine. Generally, when we stick to a more routine where we expect what we're doing and we know what we're going to do at certain times, it's easier for our bodies to synchronize with it and in turn fall asleep a little bit easier at night. So if you take some time to reflect on what your daily routine looks like, and this is on your average, maybe your weekdays, if you go to bed at different times all the time, maybe you consider having that set time at night that you try to aim for going to bed so your body can be ready and expect going to bed rather than saying, hey, I should be awake at this time, if you get what I'm saying. So that's the first thing to consider is your routine, your day, what time you wake up and what time you go to bed at night. The second thing to consider is your diet. So it might be interesting to think of how your diet can correlate with your sleep. Seems like two different activities, but they're actually very intertwined. Do you happen to eat a lot of processed foods or sugars or caffeine? All of those can have a great impact on your ability to go to bed. What do you eat before you go to bed? Think about maybe the 1 to 3 hour gap right before you tend to go to bed. Do you eat anything? If so, what does it look like? If it tends to be sugars or even caffeine, you are going to more likely have a difficult time falling asleep because your body is really kind of on these uppers, and then it causes the mind and the heart to start beating and the mind to start racing, and it can be very difficult to fall asleep in some sort of state. So you might be lying there in bed with the eyes wide open being like, why can't I sleep? My mind is racing or it feels like my heart's beating out of my chest. So your diet can play a huge effect on your ability to fall asleep. If you do notice that you tend to eat just kind of processed foods or sugar or even caffeine before you go to bed, or even that kind of span of a couple hours before you go to bed, maybe you try switching it up. Maybe you go towards having a piece of fruit or something lighter that isn't going to give you quite a buzz, which makes it difficult to go to bed. Another great and huge factor to consider that might be messing up your ability to fall asleep is the amount of stress in your life. Now this one can be a big one. If you notice that you tend to lay down for bed and the mind just starts racing, or even if you tend to get up in the middle of the night and your mind's just going like crazy, you might have a lot of stress that you're going through right now, and that's totally fine. We all have a certain amount of stress in our lives. But how well do you manage that stress? So I'd like to suggest to you that maybe you take into consideration what's stressing you out in the moment. Become mindful of those thoughts that are coming to you when you're finding it difficult to fall asleep. Are they imaginary situations? Are they things that have actually happened that you keep playing on replay? Are they worries, concerns, anxieties, whatever it is? Start to become aware of what's actually on your mind that's keeping you awake. Is it all the possible situations of what could happen in the world? Whatever it is, awareness is the first step. Once you become aware, you can start to work with those thoughts and maybe settle them a bit. The job of the mind is to think. In no way, shape, or form in any practice are we here to shut the mind off, but yoga and meditation, obviously two practices that I love, really help to declutter the mind, if you will. So I've had students tell me, especially after the meditation flow class that I teach, which is on Thursdays at 7 p.m., that they find those nights in particular, they can fall asleep so much easier. Why? Because we spend an hour with ourselves and allowing ourselves to simply be with the mind, let ourselves decompress, so when it comes time to go to bed at night, it's so much easier to fall asleep. So rather than trying to therapize yourself, if that's a word, Maybe you take on some practices which help declutter your mind and evoke a sense of self-esteem and okayness, if you will, within. So when you go to bed at night, it's easier to calm down and relax. If you're not one who's ready to take on a practice such as yoga or meditation, something that you can do before going to bed is simply focus on your breath. So say you lay down, eyes are closed or open, whatever you choose. Allow your body to relax and simply feel the breath in your body. So almost like counting sheep, but a little different. Instead, you're simply focusing on feeling the breath. Now, inevitably, the mind will start to wander and think about all those things on your mind, and that's okay. We're not here to stop it. But when you become aware of it, when you notice it, simply come back to feeling the breath in your body. And you simply repeat that, and I'm willing to bet rather than you going off on a million tangents in your mind, you'll fall asleep and relax a lot easier when you feel the breath within. When we feel the breath, it turns off that fight or flight response and allows the mind and body to relax. So maybe you give that a try. One final thing that kind of is summed up with that last point is take in mind the activities that you do throughout the day and, again, specifically right before you go to bed. Do you tend to watch TV shows that are anxiety-ridden or get your heart pumping, or do you tend to read a book? I'm willing to bet that if you are more taking part in relaxing activities before you go to bed rather than stress-inducing ones, even getting off a stressful phone call or whatever it is, you'll find it easier to be able to drift off to sleep. So become aware. The first step for any sort of change in our lives is finding awareness, becoming aware of where we're at right now, and playing around with those little modifications. Please know that nothing is a one-size-fits-all, or is it a magic pill that will change your life overnight. Everything is practice. We're always continually learning about ourselves and living life, if you will. So take some time, try out those different things. Again, maybe you play around with your routine, your diet, what you do before bed, the activities you take a part in, or even practicing yoga and or meditation or simply a breathing exercise while you're in bed to allow yourself to decompress before you actually go to bed. I hope those tips help you out. Let me know if you have any comments, questions, anything. I'm always here for you. Thank you so much for sharing your beautiful time and energy with me here today. Namaste.